Here's where we left off last time. The map's not looking too pretty. So far, it's just plain rectangles. We need to replace those rectangles with actual tile sprites. We can go about this one of two ways. One, we can load all the tiles as separate PNG files into a table. Then it's just a matter of using the tile data's number IDs as a way of indexing into that table and drawing the tile. The second way, which I prefer, is to place all of the tiles in a single PNG file, which is called an atlas. Then we need to cut up that atlas into smaller rectangles and store them as something called quads in Love2D. I'll show you the first way first, since it's a little bit simpler. So back here in our project, I'm going to close this, and I created a new folder called Textures. And in this folder, I have all of my tile sprites. I have some grass, some water. These are just things that I downloaded from Kenney. And originally they were 16 by 16 pixels, but because our map is using 64 pixel tiles, I just upscaled them all to 64 pixels. And you'll notice that each one is suffixed with a number. So 1, 2, 3. So it's all tile underscore number, and that's going to be very helpful to us. So back here in our main file, I'm going to store those in something, so I'm just going to call it tile sprites, and it's just going to be an empty table. And what we're going to do is loop through all of our files here, load them as a new image, and then store them inside of our tile sprites table. So for that, I'm going to create a new function called load tile sprites. And before I forget, I'm going to call that right here. Okay. So in here, we're going to start at 1. And then, how many do we have? We have 18. So 18, I'm just going to hard code that value in. So for this, I'm going to create a new image. So new tile, love.graphics.newImage. And here all we need to pass in is just a file name. So what is our file name going to be? Well, for that, I'm going to create a string. So file name equals string.format. Now, if you've never used string.format, here's how it works. So we know that it starts with tile underscore, and then it's going to be a number, and we don't know what that number is, so it's going to be %d, which just means insert an integer, insert a number here, and then .png. Now, how do we get the number? Well, we pass in the iterator as the second argument. So whatever I is going to be at this point, it's going to be placed right here. If you ever programmed in C or C#, you're probably familiar with these sort of format specifiers. Like if you've ever used the printf statement, it's pretty much the same thing. So that's what string.format is doing. So now we can just simply put that here, file name. And then we need to insert that into the table. So table.insert tile sprites and new tile. Okay. So now all of the tiles are going to be stored in here. And how do we get to them? Well, we know that, with tables, we could just access them like arrays. Like we could put in a number here like 1 or 2. And conveniently, all of our tile data right here is numbers. Well, we have 0, which of course is not going to work. I guess we can assume for now that 0 is just going to be no tile data. So very, very quickly, since I don't want this whole thing to be empty, I'm just going to fill this up with 1s and 2s, just to demonstrate. Okay, I've changed my map, so now it's just 1s and 2s. I suppose I could make some of these 0 just to show what happens if there's no tile there, but I'm going to leave that like that for now. So I'm going to save that. And now back in our map object. You remember how we're drawing everything here with just this big long if statement? Well, we don't actually need that anymore, so I can just delete this. And I can do love.graphics draw. Yeah, just simply draw. Draw takes in anything that's a drawable type in Love2D, and that would be just like the tile sprites we just loaded. So in here I can do tile sprites, and what is our tile sprite going to be? Well, it's going to be the tile that we got here. Remember from last time we're getting the tile, and that's just going to be the number right here. So put that in tile, and then the position, so SX and SY. And I think we're good to go. Of course, you'll want to be careful that the tile is actually something that fits into that table. Like if it's, you want to check to see if it's 0. So we can do like if tile is greater than 0, then draw it. Otherwise, don't draw anything. So that's one thing we can do, and we should also check to see that it's not greater than whatever is in the table. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it at that, and let's see what we get. Oops. Well, I just made a big mistake. I actually forgot to put in the subfolder name, so you're probably all yelling at me right now, so I'll just put that in here. Gosh, this is a mistake I always make. Okay. There, I think it's not so bad. We got some actual tiles. These are all 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then we got some 2s as well. I think these... Well, some of these are 2s. Probably these are 2s, these are 2s, these are 2s. Okay. But I think I'm going to change some of the map data just so it looks a little nicer. I'll do that off camera. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created a new layout here. If we run that, yep, it looks much nicer. We now have this nice little lake here. And if you're like me and you're getting this right here, well, that's simply because we forgot to get rid of our set tile from last time. So let's just comment that out. Okay, good. Now this is really just a combination of corner tiles and edge tiles and some middle areas as well. That's how we're able to create this nice little lake right here. You could try using your own tiles and making your own layout if you want. But now let's try doing the same thing but using a tile atlas instead of individual files. I think that will be much better for performance. It also makes games much easier to manage when everything is in a single file. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created a new folder, Textures 2, and I've created this tile sheet right here. So I just took the tiles from before and I put them on a single PNG file. Now this is 512 by 512 pixels, and if you remember, each tile is 64 pixels. So we got 8 tiles per row and 8 per column, so a total of 64 tiles can fit on here, which is not too bad, but you'll probably want a bigger one. So if we look at how this thing is going to be indexed, so this one right here in the corner is going to be tile 1, and then tile 2, tile 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And then on the next row it's going to be tile 9, I guess. So we need to cut this up. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of all of the stuff we had from last time. We don't need these loading functions anymore. And I'm going to create a new texture, tile texture, and that is going to be love.graphics, new image, and textures 2/tile sheet 01.png. Okay. And we now need to cut this up. So we are going to need a helper function for that. So I will create a function called createQuads, which is going to divide up this image into rectangles called quads. So it's going to take in a texture, a tile width, and a tile height. Now you may be wondering, like, we know that it's a square tile, so why do we need to separate these two? Well, you may have rectangular tiles. You might have an animation, like a character animation, and maybe the character is taller than he's wider. So something like that. So it's good practice to keep these separate. So we will create an empty table called quads, and then at the very end we will return that table. So now we need to populate this. So it's going to be an awful lot like when we were drawing the tiles. So we're going to calculate the width and height first. So the number of rows is going to be get height divided by tile height. So we're dividing our tile sheet by the size of each tile. And you got to be careful because you don't want to divide by 0, so you might want to put some error checking in here. And you don't want a floating point value either, so you might want to round up or down. Right now I'm pretty confident that this is going to divide evenly. Okay, so local calls can equal texture get width. Okay. And now we're going to use two for loops, one nested in the other, just like when we drew our tiles. So j is going to equal 0 rows minus 1, and then for I equals 0 calls minus 1. Okay, and we're going to create our quad. It's going to equal love.graphics.new quad. So set of new image, new quad. And that's going to take in an x and a y. So the x is going to be that times the tile width. And then the y is going to be that times the tile height. And then we also need the width, which is the tile width, and the height, tile height. And then finally we need the texture dimensions. So we're just going to do texture get dimensions, which will give us the width and height. And then finally we just insert that into the table. Okay, we insert into our quads table that quad we just created, and then it returns the whole thing. And that should be good enough. So below here I'm going to create, oh sorry, we don't want this to be local. That's a mistake. So we want tile quads, and that is going to be, well, that's going to be create quads. That will return a new table. We'll pass in the tile texture and 64 by 64. Okay, good. That should be good enough for that. Now, here in our map, we have this draw function. Before we were drawing from this array of tiles. So I'm just going to get rid of that and replace it with our tile texture. And there's actually an overload for our draw function. We can actually pass in a quad. So we can pass in tile quads. And what should the index be? Well, I said before that this is going to be 1, 2, 3, etc. So we're just going to pass in the tile. Okay. Now let's see how that looks. Well, I mean, it's working, but it doesn't look like what we had before. And you probably guessed why that is. It's because the numbers here do not correspond to what's on the tile sheet. And this is something you really have to be careful with when you work with tile maps. That when you change the layout of your tiles or your tile sheet, like what you have for your map data may not correspond to that. So that's something to really look out for. And Yeah, I believe some tile editors can actually manage that for you. But I'm just going to change all of this manually off camera. Okay, I've changed the numbers, so now they should correspond to the sprite sheet. Let's have a look at that. Yep, it looks the same as it did before. And there you have it. That is how you add graphics to a tile map. Now, you probably guessed that it's very tedious to have to change all of these numbers by hand. You'd probably want to use some sort of editor program like Tile to change these things visually. And that's exactly... Well, I'm not going to teach how to use Tile, but I am going to show you how you could export something created in that program and load it into your own tile map. So, I'm very excited about that. If you found this video useful, like and subscribe. Thank you. Have a good day.